Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. So I'm delighted today to have a very special guest on my channel. So this is something that's been in the making for a while now. We've not had a chance to actually form a good time to set this up, but now we do. Now we finally do. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity. This is actually someone that got me involved into the YouTube scene maybe 6-7 months ago. Little did I know I'd actually have a somewhat respectable channel. Anyway, somehow, I don't know how, but he does not have 1 million subscribers yet, so please follow him and subscribe to his channel if you have not already. So I'm going to bring him on now. Of course, if you haven't guessed yet, the guest is Harry Sopanos. How's it going?
G'day, mate. How's it going, Jonathan? Yep.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, nice. We're going to keep this talk today a little bit about bodybuilding, but feel free to ask any questions you have in the comment section. We'll get to them as well. That'll be good for you. Good for you guys to have a guy here who really knows his stuff. He doesn't mess around. He takes his information very seriously. He doesn't haphazardly just put crap on the internet. So someone to listen to and someone to respect, definitely. So
thank you.
I'd first like to talk a bit about the carnivore diet and how it is useful for bodybuilding. Maybe we could go into like the bare basics, like about nutrition and stuff like that. So what do you think about that? How do you find that it's useful for building muscles and maybe some amino acid stuff?
Yeah. Well, I think the key thing about the carnivore diet is what it furnishes. At the end of the day, it's really macros and micros that are going to optimize muscle skeletal structures in the way they work. So if you're not getting enough of those things, or you're actually eating inappropriate foods that are going to impede the uptake of those nutrients, that's going to have deleterious effects on the physiology. Whether you like it or not, that is the reality. I mean, a lot of people will argue all sorts of things out there. I mean, I've seen a few of the colourful vagoons that you've basically looked at, trying to build muscle. I mean, really? On a vegan diet? On a, that's, as Bart Kay would call it, the Church of Anorexia Vegana. It's just devoid of, the nutrients that a body requires. It's just ridiculous. I mean, most people know me. They know my hair grows like mad continuously. I have to cut it back. Obviously, I do have genetics that predispose me to alopecia and baldness. So a lot of my relatives have that. I don't have that problem. I've reversed a lot of that sort of issues. I was having my hair cut today and just talking with the actual, this is anecdotal evidence, obviously, but talking with my barber and his partner, she's Mongolian background. And he was talking about her grandfather, 110, and the guy just eats meat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you basically shakes your hand and you feel like you've basically just been squeezed. So he goes, he's strong. And I go, that's the difference between animal products and all that. He says, yeah, I don't do all the thing the right way. And I actually said to him, look, I'm 57 this year. And he goes, he thought I was 40. And he goes, no bloody way. And I told him about how the importance about protein in hair quality. I mean, and also taurine plays that, or sulfurs in because one thing that animal foods are, they're rich in sulfur amino acids. Like methionine, like taurine, like all these sort of things that have that ability to bind keratin. So you end up with better nails, better skin, better hair, all over. You improve the collagen structures within your body. So, and you don't get and if you're eating an animal-based food, it's going to be more balanced in the amount of deuterium you get in the actual diet as well, which plays a big role. Too much, you end up with damaging your mitochondria and affecting your energy. And also you end up having too much, ends up in your collagen structures, which actually gives you that stiffness as you get older. You feel that stiffness because that's just deuterium accumulation in the collagen structures. So as you're damaging your mitochondria, less can actually be pulled in for oxidative phosphorylation. As a consequence, it ends up accumulating, then bioaccumulating inside the cells and building up. And that's where you get the reverse Krebs cycle that actually can then pull it in to produce more lactate. And that sort of goes into a senescent state of the cell and can move on to a cancerous state under certain circumstances. I mean, now they're talking about in Australia, 2 in 5 having cancer. It's a disaster. This is what seed oils and carbohydrates, which are high in deuterium, cause long term. They will basically push people's cellular structures towards senescence and potentially, under the right circumstances, to cancerous. So, let alone all the stiffness and all the other problems that you get. Not having too much, being too catabolic, like the vagoons, or people that do these really plant-based keto diets, they end up the other way, not enough protein. They end up not getting enough deuterium, because deuterium in protein is lower than sugars and the seed oils, but is slightly higher than the fats, which is good because that's what you want. You want in the collagen structures to have good strength, but not too much to create stiffness. So this is what an animal-based diet, it actually gives you better muscle structure because you're eating foods which have the appropriate mix of deuterium in the 140 ppm, not in the 150 or 60, which is what you get in the carbohydrates. And the fats, they're in the middle range. So even at the what we could call the type of subatomic particles that are provided, that's part of the quantum biology, which we could go in later on, but we'll keep it simple for people. What you get from the actual food that can either be used to create ATP or can be used within cellular structures has to be within certain boundaries, within certain ranges. The energy part of animal foods is smack in the middle, especially if it's grass-fed or it's pastured, stuff like that. It's pretty much in the 115 ppm, which is between the 100. You don't want to be below 100 because that's when you don't have strong collagen structures, but you don't want to be above 130. That's a sweet spot. Animal fats are smack in the middle, with bacon being slightly less at about 113. When you feed the animal carbohydrates, seed oils or crap, what it does is it pushes the ppm into 120 odd, 122 at most, sometimes a bit higher. But even there, you're still in the sweet spot. You're not basically in the danger spot. And if that's all they can afford, they're still going to get energy, which is not going to be damaging. I usually do encourage people that have got cancer or stuff like that, which have got too much deuterium accumulation, to try and go for better quality fats, obviously, in that regard. But the ultimate thing is that what a carnivore diet would give you is a macronutrient composition that is ideal for the human body, and also a deuterium level, which is also proper. Also, it will keep your insulin to glucagon ratio at around about 1.3 plus, which means that you don't have excessive amounts of insulin, but at the same time, you don't need, because I've actually done a video showing that leucine is what drives muscle protein synthesis, not insulin. You can actually be fasted and still get muscle protein synthesis if you get enough leucine in.
Yes.
So that is a whole bunch of bollocks, as Ted would say. It's absolute bollocks for what people, argue. Oh, I need insulin. Yeah, just look at the current bodybuilders. Unlike the old ones who could live into their ripe old age of, that used to eat the steak and eggs and some dairy and stuff like that. They were living in their 90s and stuff like that, in the 80s, or, as long as they weren't dying from accidents or whatever else. But they were living, a lot of them were actually living in their 90s, and one of them actually died recently, a British guy who changed his diet at 95 for whatever reason, started doing marathons, which is contraindicated, plus and not weightlifting, and stopped competing, and went on a more plant-based diet for 3 years, and at 98 dropped dead. Say no more. Another bodybuilder years ago, I forget his name, he basically ended up dying in his 70s, but not from any disease or anything like that. He was, and this is back quite a few years back in the, I think in the 70s or 80s. He was lifting actually, and back then, things like fridges and stuff like that. This was a washing machine, but I believe. These are heavy things, and he was lifting that in his 70s up the stairs. He slipped, and it crushed him. But we're talking about now 70-year-old, a mid 70-year-old. I think he was 76. And then you're talking about this guy that, cut my hair today and goes, Harry, my father-in-law, 110. And he could shake your hand and you could feel the grip, a strong grip. And he goes, yeah, it makes sense. Because we were talking about some of this sort of stuff. And he goes, and I go, look, you got to eat more animal foods. You will feel stronger and better for it. Take the example of your grandfather-in-law or whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because, people compare the diets. People in the vegan space, the vegan bodybuilding space, they say, I still get my protein because it matches what you'd eat in a standard Western diet or in a carnivore diet.
Yep.
You went to a really good point there. People just looking at the numbers on a calculator, they don't look at the actual micronutrients, the anti-nutrients, the deuterium.
Exactly. They're not looking at any of this sort of stuff. Yeah.
They don't go into the stuff.
Yeah, they're missing all these nuances that are so important for the actual functioning, in that regard. I'll give you an example. They will not get enough in some sense methionine in some cases, or they won't get enough leucine, or they won't get enough arginine, because these are more higher in animal foods, and I know that they've got these funny sort of veganerized supplements that they've got out there, but a lot of them are full of, because they're soy-based or whatever else, they're full of anti-nutrients. They're horrendous. What they do to the endocrine system, the hormonal system, and many other functionings of the body, let alone they tend to be much higher. So if you actually have, let's say you do a whey supplement. Now, a whey supplement comes from an animal product. That will have a lower level of deuterium, around about the 140 odd mark. You get one of these soy, whatever, they're already, the actual soy crap and all that is already in the 150 odd. Process it, you're pushing it to 170. The closer you get to 180, that's a danger zone. And when you get over like seed oils are 255 parts per million, well, goodbye. It's really just, you're killing your mitochondria. You're killing your ability to produce energy. And as the mitochondria decline in density, so inside, all those folds that you have, the actual mitochondria, there are electron chains on each side, and you've got a protein gradient that actually builds up there. The complexes pump through the protons, and then as that gradient increases, then it pushes against the ATPase, which is that nanomotor, the complex 5 that just rotates at up to 9,000 RPM. But if you're putting neutrons through, because that's what deuterium does, it's got an additional neutron in its nucleus rather than just a proton, so it's called 2H as well in scientific terms, that will actually slow down or bust those motors if there are too many neutrons coming through. And the more of those motors you bust, the less energy you have over time. The less energy you have over time, the less capacity to heal you have over time. That's a problem. Now, what does an animal food give you when it comes to mitochondrial health? Well, it actually, when you've got there are a number of, there are 3 types of ATPase in the system. One of them, which is the V type, that actually helps a number of organelles inside the cytoplasm, inside the cell. Plays a critical role in cleaning up the junk, so to speak. Very important to clean out the crap out of that. What does that require? Leucine and arginine. If leucine does the critical part, but if you don't have enough arginine, you've got a problem. You basically then, what is it called? Castor 1 then ends up there ends up inhibiting castrol-2, which one affects the other. And so if you do that, and that is a consequence of not having enough arginine. So immediately an animal-based food will give you sufficient leucine and arginine to allow even for cellular cleanup to happen, which is critically important. So for bodybuilders that are actually causing a lot of oxidative stress, a lot of, they're lifting a lot of weights and stuff like that, if you don't have quality protein, you're not going to get these macronutrients in the right composition that you require, so your cellular functions can improve, but also the cleaning up of those cellular functions. Also, you're not going to get enough taurine. What does taurine do? Well, taurine inhibits lactate. So through as you're going through glycolysis, when you get to pyruvate, you can either go back through lactate, and that lactate then being produced will go all the way back to the liver, get repackaged as either glycogen or glucose to be sent back to the periphery or to other parts of the body, obviously the brain or anywhere else that it's needed. But we're just talking about the periphery now, which is the musculoskeletal part. So that will go back. But at the same time, what taurine will do is minimize the amount of lactate and force it through the Krebs cycle and oxidize it, which really means you're also reducing the amount and also deal with the reactive oxygen species that come from that, but also lowering the amount of lactate as well. So, which is critically important because it actually improves the actual functioning of the muscles as well. It means you can go for longer as well when you're exercising. So I usually say to people, well, if you're a smaller frame, about 45 minutes, taking a couple of grams of taurine. If you're about middle frame, about a bit over an hour. And if you're a big person like yourself, Jonathan, you're probably looking at about 90 odd minutes. So you can actually saturate your whole body with taurine, which will basically reduce some of that oxidative stress, reduce the lactate, oxidize it, use it, and actually force you into a state where you can, one, perform for slightly longer to enhance protein synthesis after the recovery, but at the same time, you can also keep down the amount of oxidative stress in the mitochondria, which is really important to maintain mitochondrial health for long-term abilities to basically heal and get the advantages of the bodybuilding that you're doing as well.
Yeah, I like that. And what I'm seeing nowadays in bodybuilding is, of course, with a lot of recent deaths, one of my bodybuilding idols, maybe a year ago, he died, Cedric McMillan. And lots of other people have died recently as well. Insulin, definitely. Diuretics, all sorts of things.
It's killing them.
Cancer, heart attacks, all sorts of things.
Yeah, it's bad.
It's interesting you say all this because they're now becoming more health conscious.
What else is happening with heart issues? Left ventricular hypertrophy.
Yeah.
What does taurine do? It inhibits it.
And
it maintains the right modeling of your heart, so you don't get this problem. So when you're eating animal based, and you're not eating just basically soy crap and whatever else, again, it comes back to eating the animal foods. You're going to get more taurine that way. You're not going to get it from a pure powder. Well, you can use a powder as additional bulking material, but it's not going to. You still have to eat quite a lot of meat, animal foods, or seafood or whatever that's got even more taurine than So combine some elements of seafood as well. You need those foods because those foods will give you the additional nutrients that don't exist in powders. And vegans, they can't get taurine in plant foods, and in their powders, it doesn't exist either, unless it's put in there as a supplement. And most of them are completely ignorant about it as well.
Definitely when it comes to taurine. What I'm seeing now is because of all the health problems that have come about in recent years, they are more health conscious now, but they're not making the right actions to prevent the health problems themselves. So what they're doing is they're having injectable glutathione. They're sort of adding more things to the mix rather than just changing the diet itself, which is what's causing the problem.
The glutathione supplementation doesn't really work.
Yeah, it doesn't do a lot. It's a bit of a misnomer, that one. It's a bit of an odd one.
Yeah. So What can one say? It's actually if you eat the nutrients that actually produce intracellular antioxidants like glutathione, superoxide dismutase, or catalase, it's really eating the animal foods are going to give you the nutrients to build those things. And when you've got lower insulin, you can actually produce within your own body. It's an excess insulin that also can affect negatively intracellular antioxidants. So on top of that, they're increasing their oxidative stress, and in recovery, they can't actually reduce that oxidative stress because they're not having the nutrients that can do that. As a consequence, they do more damage, accumulative damage, where a carnivore bodybuilder will actually have the nutrients to reduce that oxidative stress and actually heal better. Their mitochondria work better. Everything works better.
Yeah, it makes more sense. It does come down to essentially the mitochondrial level. How do you fix it? And the carnivore diet does just that.
Exactly.
You know, it's the big key here, I think. If you don't mind, I want to get to a few questions that people have.
Yeah,
We've got
go
about
right
3 or
ahead.
4. Guys, we are keeping this bodybuilding specific if we can. So
Yep.
that's the aim of this, but I'll just put them up anyway. So we've got a question
Not a
from
problem.
Herb Dean. He said, this might be a silly question, but should store-bought cheese made from pasteurized milk be avoided with the same vigor? Some people claim you should avoid drinking pasteurized milk.
Well,
So
let's
like
put it
cheddar
this,
cheese versus raw
yeah.
milk, you know.
Well, let's put it this way: raw milk or raw dairy is going to be way better. In terms of the micronutrient profile, you're going to get far more. You'll get vitamin C, you'll get more B vitamins, minerals, no difference. That depends. Mineral loss depends on the way you process the stuff rather than anything else, or the way you store it, the way you deal with it, or whatever. So you're not going to get much mineral loss either way. Now, the other component is not only pasteurization has an effect on certain types of peptides as well, but also has a certain type of an effect on also the fatty acids as well. Can slightly cause a bit of, to the PUFA ones, a bit of damage there, but not a lot. It's very minuscule. We're talking about trace levels, so nothing really to heavily worry about. But to be complete, we need to mention this. The other part is the worst part of the general, you could say, store milk is the when things, when we do homogenization, and it's not really the protein structures that I'm worried about, it's the fatty acids, that they're breaking up the what I call the food matrix of the fatty acids. And by doing that, they're actually leaving the vulnerability to the MUFAs and PUFAs for higher oxidation to happen. Now, obviously, because dairy is primarily saturated and has much less MUFA and PUFA, again, it's just in the trace amounts, but slightly more than just the pasteurization. Now, in a low carbohydrate state where you've got intracellular antioxidants that we talked about before upregulated, can it manage this amount? Yes. But do you lose some of the micronutrient and some of the benefits like lactoferrin. Now, lactoferrin is really important. It helps with in the gut as well, but elsewhere, it increases interferon, which is part of the immune system. So it helps that part. So it's been used for years and years by old doctors in the past to help people heal their guts and stuff like that. But at the same time, for dairy is a good source also of this type of amino acids that enhance protein synthesis. So generally speaking, I do encourage people to use it. It has higher in terms of bioavailability than even meat. It's equal to that of eggs in that regard. So eggs and dairy have those features. It's a reason why a lot of bodybuilders have used it in the past. And also you can get liquid source. Dairy, you can get dairy down your system in greater amounts. Some people think it varies in that regard. So I know a lot of the old bodybuilders used to use a lot of the dairy powders and a lot of the dairy, and egg powders and stuff like that to try and get more aminos in and stuff like that. So yeah, it can be used in that regard as well. But I wouldn't go, if that's all you can afford, pasteurized, it's still going to be better than carbs, so starches and fruit and stuff like that. It's going to be a hell of a lot better on the deuterium side, as well on, just the general fatty acid profile and many other things. So in my personal opinion, it trumps those other foods.
Yeah, I like that. Good thing I drink a lot of dairy then, and I aim to get raw if I can. So I'm glad about that one. I can't be shot down for that one.
I think another thing is people are concerned, who are doing low carb in particular, they're concerned, even though they may do low grade ketosis type, they're concerned about, dropping out of ketosis. Well, 2 glasses of milk, usually you're talking about, 250 mils of liquid, and that's going to give you, let's say, it's around, the raw milk's about 3.8 that I have, but let's say it's about 4-ish in that regard. You're looking at about 10 plus grams, 2 glasses of milk, 20 plus grams. You're still in ketosis at below 25 grams. And if you're a big person, you could double that to a litre of milk a day. You'd still be below the 50 grams. So you'll still be in low-grade ketosis. So, people to argue that it's going to affect, your low carbohydrate state is a bit, ridiculous, to say the least. And the Messiah see that. I mean, I know Mary Ruddock, when I've interviewed her, she did she stayed with a Messiah and actually lived with them for a period of time, seeing how they ate and what they didn't. And she had taken a lot of blood glucose and ketone sticks with her to measure these people and notice that they were in this low grade level, both the women, the men, and the children. So it was interesting. So they weren't in a completely severely catabolic state, but they weren't in a severely anabolic state, but they still had good muscular skeletal tone because they're eating enough animal foods. As I said earlier, protein synthesis is driven by leucine primarily, signaling. So you only need a small amount of insulin signaling. This whole thing that, unless you want to grow adipose tissue, that's when you need the other stuff. But, the body's not stupid. It knows how to do it. Otherwise, these tribal people would be wasting away, not building muscle.
Yeah, that's true. They're quite dense-looking people as well.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't like to get in a fight with them.
Exactly. So, it's ridiculous. It's just ignorant Westerners that have been brainwashed by carb-centric bro science.
Yeah, completely agree. We've got a question here from Andrew, which I thought was quite interesting. So, how do reduce body fat and carnivore increase or decrease fat intake? Low intensity cardio.
Look, the only sort of cardio that I recommend is walking. That's it. I don't recommend any other cardio. Steady state cardio is very unhealthy for your heart long term, and generally for your body. As long as you keep the carbs out, you're not going to have a problem. It's all about Randall cycle, not engaging the Randall cycle by putting in too much carbs and fat at the same time. Now, with fat, you can actually play around. There's a lot of different strategies, I just did a video showing on, how to increase, how the Inuit stay warm by eating taurine-rich foods, which then allows them to uncouple their mitochondria and actually, especially increasing, the brown adipose tissue. So taurine can actually help increase, fat loss. It does it by a number of different ways. One way is it is a mild myostatin inhibitor. So it does lower myostatin slightly. and so it amplifies the effects of leucine in building muscle. More muscle you have, high metabolic rate. You'll be able to oxidize more fat because you need more energy to basically maintain that muscle mass. Simple as that. So if you're trying to get enough, I always say to people, get enough protein in your body, and you don't want to go into a sort of state of what is called rabbit starvation or anything like that, and have issues like that. So you still need to get a certain amount of fat. But you can actually, if you're getting about a 30% odd, you will need, initially, I'd say to people, go a bit higher to increase your ketotic state.
Yeah.
And then cut on that. And then the body will just naturally reduce the fat. Now, this is for people who are healthy bodybuilders doing that sort of stuff to try and actually reduce their body fat. I've got no problems there. I always remind people that if you've actually been consuming shitloads and shitloads, I do have a video on that, shitloads of high deuterium seed oils. When you lose fat, you can actually cause damage to your mitochondria. I used to be a big seed oil consumer. And so when I lost, within 6 months, 15 kilos, I ended up with a bit of brain fog because I did mitochondrial damage because that stored deuterium reduced out of my fat cells. And I've had to keep myself, even though I've got a couple of kilos to lose, I eat liquid fat to dilute my fat stores in order to basically, the bodybuilders I criticize about eating carbs and being muscular fat, well, I've got a bit of that. But that's deliberate. That's deliberate because I'm trying to dilute. I could buy deuterium depleted water, but that can lower it in the general source in the body, but it's not going to eliminate it within the fat cells. I need to put other fat to go inside the fat cells. So do you want to be a healthy corpse or an unhealthy corpse? I mean, there is, it depends on what you want to do. I'll give you an example. You remember that lady, I forget her name, she actually was a low carb lady that died from cancer not too long ago.
Yeah, I can't remember her name. But
Exactly.
yeah.
She was actually doing more plant-based in the past, and she used to consume a lot of seed oils because the doctors used to recommend it. She had a lot of stored. So when she lost rapid weight, she also damaged a lot of our mitochondria. As a consequence, she ended up with cancer. So let that be a lesson to you that your past indiscretions can come back and haunt you. And that's why I did a video about are your fat cells could potentially be harming you when you're trying to do fat loss. So I recommend to people, I've got 2 more years to go. I recommend to people that they keep their fat levels up. Don't worry about losing weight. That's unimportant. And focus on diluting the amount of deuterium in your fat cells. Then you can do a periodic cut to see, how do I feel? How's my brain functioning feeling? Am I feeling less energy? So, and this is for the older crowd. Now, the younger crowd, because the younger crowd are going to have less accumulated deuterium in their fat cells, less of a problem. I've got less. So if Andrew is basically a younger person, not a problem. I don't care. If he does a cut and a severe cut as well, remember the rat that did 70% protein and only 30% fat and literally just was doing very minimal fat just to prevent rabbit starvation, but the rat just thinned out like mad. So, because at the end of the day, you've got to get the energy from somewhere. And if you're not giving it to the person, it's going to take it from the, this is what a cut is, forcing your body to basically take it from the body. But that can be dangerous if you've been exposed. You're a middle-aged person like me, I'm 57, and you've actually exposed yourself to shitloads of seed oil for most of your life. That's why I do these pulsatile things. I do for a period, then I stop, keep my fat levels up, and I remain weight stable for a number of years, and then I go again a bit, and then again. And I do it deliberately because I don't want to be an attractive corpse in middle age. I want to live beyond 100 like my great-grandfather lived to 107. And I'm not going to achieve that. And he was just, he lived in the mountains, dairy and meat, hated vegetables. And like this older geezer of the the Mongolian family that I was telling you about earlier. So I know the damage that I've done to myself. So I'm very, very careful the way I go about things. So I
Yeah.
say to people, it's not how quick you get somewhere, and it's not about body image and all that in that regard. So forget about that sort of stuff. I mean, my upper body is much bigger than my midsection, but it's still got some there. But I'm not in a hurry to get rid of it, to lean out completely, for a six pack. That's not
Yeah.
my focus because I know what's in there and I need to dilute it. Because each time chylomicrons come in from the intestine, they're actually going to the adipose tissue and dropping stuff off, and occasionally then taking stuff back. And so I understand that process, and I know that there's a turnover for those fat cells of 7 odd years. So I've still got 2 more years to go before I do a big cut. And even then, I'm just going to do a 1 month, then check, then another. Then I'll weight stable myself with eating liquid fats. I use cream for my coffee. In the past, I used to use milk, but I couldn't actually hold on to my weight. So I was losing weight. I'm going, nah, I have to stop this. And now I like cream, but it's still, by consuming a lot of liquid fat, I maintain my weight stable, and I'm diluting my mitochondria. So we need to be very careful. If you're middle age, get muscular. I mean, I don't do a lot of exercise. I do at home. I don't go to a gym like Jonathan. But Jonathan competes. I basically stick to home, and I actually do weights once a week. And still,
That's respectable.
and that's
Yeah, I'll be
57
happy
years
with
of
that
age.
at 50 odd years old or whatever.
You know,
You know. Yeah.
and that's basically a 57-year-old. So
57 as well. Yeah.
exactly.
There
Well,
we go.
in September,
Yeah.
and most people don't realise that the importance is the nutrition, guys. The nutrition, and don't hurry to be an attractive corpse. Is my take-home message for the middle-aged people that have accumulated a lot. Dilute for 7 years. Use a low-dose vitamin E, the Jarrow 1 Toco, which is a complex, in the first 4 years at least. And that's to deal with the aldehydes and the sort of the primary, secondary oxidative products that will come out of the fat cells. You need to deal with that, unfortunately, as well, to reduce the amount of damage to the cardiolipin in the mitochondria, after complex 4, that part which then allows protons to go through back into the matrix away from that, mitochondrial part, which reduces the amount of proton gradients, which means reduces the speed of your ATPase, which then less energy, basically. So we need to keep all these things nuanced and understanding the way we go about doing things. And it's not about how fast somebody gets to the promised land. It's a question of getting there in one piece, is the take-home message. So keep that in mind. And it's really important because a lot of people ask me about, they're more focused on, image and less focused on health. Health is important because prior exposure puts you at risk at a different level of risk depending on your prior exposure. And I don't know what Andrew's prior exposure is. I hope it's low compared to mine. I ended up with cardiovascular disease at 44 because of excessive amounts of seed oils consumption. I was a fast food junkie, pretty much. My fridge was full of pizza boxes and all sorts of things. So I had a very unhealthy life: alcohol, smoking, and junk food.
Yeah, I appreciate you outlining that because that matches my slogan, which is aligning physique goals with positive health outcomes.
Exactly.
So what you're preaching now is exactly the same thing that I say to people. If you're young, you can, in a way, sort of force things a little bit faster.
Yep.
If you're older, a lot of my clients I work with are 40 plus. I'm not rushing them down to below 100 grams of fat per day. It's a very slow, incremental process, but they're getting results and they're not doing anything drastic. They're not sort of noticing that they're on a diet, and so to speak. So what you're saying does work very well.
That's important. Health is important, and lifespan, because going crazy and doing these crazy sort of things is endangering your lifespan.
Yeah, I completely agree. We've got a question here on, just on that note, you mentioned a bit about what you're doing at home. What do you think about calisthenic exercises? So body weight stuff, basically. Do you have much experience
Yeah,
with
look, um, they're useful for just generally to be able to move other muscle groups. So I see as an advantage. I've occasionally done it myself, but it's not something that I focus on necessarily. Because remember, I'm lifting weights to failure just once a week. So generally I do a lot of other, housework, general movements, general naturalistic movements. I'll push things, deliberately lift things and stuff like that, just to work a whole lot of different muscle groups. Because I walk, I also do a lot of squatting in order to make sure that I'm not, over exercising those front muscles in the top part of my leg. That can create problems. Your glutes in the back are being neglected. You can get out of balance. So there's a lot of these sort of things. Obviously, they're not going to get out of balance to the severe level that somebody doing sitting a lot and doing a lot of cardio, steady state cardio. They're going to get far more problems with their glutes and all sorts of pains and all sorts of stuff like that as well. So you need to be careful about all that sort of stuff. But walking isn't really going to do that. But you need to take care of other muscle groups because we sit a lot. Mine's a sitting job because I'm, cartographer, sitting in front of a computer, manipulating, data. And so, I have to be careful in that regard. The way I sort of exercise is in the afternoons on, usually it's a Wednesday. Sometimes it can be a Friday. And I'll work for anywhere between, 30 to 45 minutes. I'll do a couple of sets. It's not many, 5 or 6. Sometimes I'll do 10, and then I'll just hold on to the weights for dear life until I can't hold them anymore. So I'll just hold them over my head for a certain period of time, and then eventually my arms give way, and that's my failure. That's fine. I've done it then, and then after I've done that, then I'll do like 50 to 100 jumping jacks until I'm so, I'm panting. And then I'll just to get my heart rate that high intensity. And that's me. I'm done at that stage. I just sit back and I'm going, trying to get my breath. And I just, but I've pushed it to the max for that period of time. But I've done it for within an hour all up. So, and that's me.
it
And
doesn't
then
have to be anything
the
revolutionary,
body
does it?
and then allow my body to recover for the next. I think you need movement. Movement is critical. Sitting, couch potato, you're going to die early. You need to move your fluids. I do some jumping jacks in the morning as well, every day. And the reason why I do, not many, just a couple in the day. And it's just to get my just general circulation working a bit better. So that's important for people. And it just also loosens things up, unstiffens you a bit, you could say, and stuff like that. So you don't have to go like mad, as long as you're doing it on a regular day. Because one thing I like about jumping jacks also is that you're moving every single muscle group nearly, and you're also using force because it actually is going back, bang, bang, bang on the surface, and
It's
that
good for the
actually
bones.
it's good for the bones as well in that regard. So, obviously, if you're really like obese, I mean, I'm just overweight, but I'm not. But if somebody's obese, please don't do it because you could actually cause a lot of problems to your joints and stuff like that. You have to be either normal weight or just slightly overweight, like I am. So keep that in mind. Don't basically put yourself at risk for any joint problems and stuff like that. So yeah.
That's good advice. Yeah. Are you good for another 45 minutes, or is that too long
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Okay, it's a
I'm
little
not going anywhere.
it's little Tilly's 6th birthday party today.
Yep.
So it'll be 9:30, around about 45 minutes from now. So we're
Yep.
gonna do some things then. But, I'm just grateful to have you on today. Honestly, it's a pleasure.
You're welcome.
So I've got a question here. Do you think sprints is an underrated tool to lowering the most dangerous type of fat in your body? So I'm guessing he's talking about visceral
Visceral
fat.
fat, yeah. Look, sprinting can be useful in that regard, but visceral fat is a funny little thing. Depends on your genetics. So how much visceral fat somebody can be doing exactly the same diet and end up with completely different level of visceral fat due to their genetics. There are other factors as well. So what are the other factors? The amount of choline in the diet, and then there's a genetic component there. If you're not getting enough choline, you may not be synthesizing enough. Some people can synthesize a bit. Some people can synthesize next to nothing, like myself. Another genetic flaw that caused me problems potentially. It exports fat out of the liver, so it's really important to lower, fat within the organs, all organs, that is, fatty droplets. So again, that's the superiority of a carnivore diet, of an animal-based diet, that it will provide you with sufficient choline to lower these type of fats. But at the same time, you don't want to go extremely low. Sometimes people will lose subcutaneous fat around the waistline, and they'll go, "Oh, my visceral fat percentage has gone up." Don't worry, that's supposed to. If one's actually lowered, the other one's going to, as a percentage, go higher. It's the quantity that counts, not the percentage. If you've got very low subcutaneous body fat around the waistline, well, your visceral fat's going to be super high. But is it too high or just right? Remember, organs need visceral fat to function, the heart in particular. So when you have the last thing when you're starving, like like you've seen images of people in parts of the world in starvation, the last thing that actually, before you start wasting away your muscles, the last thing that starts being pulled to pieces is visceral fat. Actually, muscle will, in many cases, and skeletal will go before the visceral fat. Again, because the organs need it for energy supply. Critical, especially for the heart. So excessive accumulation of visceral fat, yes, that can be a problem, because that can affect especially if you're excessively obese and you've got a lot of visceral fat, there can be the accumulation where you've got too much fat trying to go into fat cells that are becoming high. There's a fat hypertrophy that actually happens. The fat cells grow from too much, and then as a consequence of that, you get a lot of inflammatory cytokines that are released from those visceral fat cells, affecting directly those organs. That's the problem. But if you don't have overgrowth, excessive hypertrophy of those viscera, then it's less of a problem. You still need them as first line of fat for the organs. So I wouldn't fear it, and you have to be very careful when you do any tests or any scans, that you realize that the scans are actually talking about percentages, and they base those percentages on the average population on a standard diet, which tend to have more subcutaneous fat, and it really doesn't tell you the true story. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, very important point there. I can't stress that enough. When we're looking at like what is contained within the body, when you're looking at body composition, percentage don't tell you much at all. What you're looking at is the grammages. So I could say to you, Harry, I am, I don't know, 60% protein by weight, or 18%, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
Well, how much muscle is that? You don't know. In relation to body water fat. So understand your grammages. Very important.
Yeah. It's basically to the height, what height that person has, and then based on what would be their looking at because BMI doesn't really work, because you have to take in the sort of the lean muscle mass, and so you would have to do a DEXA scan to get a proper lean muscle mass. and if unless you know how much muscle mass, then when you're doing a comparison for viscera, that will actually tell you, because if you got more, you need more. And remember, if you're in a low carbohydrate state, you get a translocation of fats inside the actual the muscle cells themselves to be closer to be able to providing for ATP energy. That is that one of those cogs of the three cogs of the energy system within the muscles. Obviously the filaments are working on primarily, pretty much glucose, but at the same time, you need energy to produce that glucose or to transport it there, stuff like that. So that's where the ATP plays a role in it. But then if your prime fuel for the ATP, for the mitochondria, is fat, you're going to get this translocation in the muscles. And I think Steve Finney actually has done with Jeff Volker a lot of research in the low carb space to show this translocation in these athletes, where they do biopsies on them and all that. So it's pretty good science, and it's pretty robust in what is actually happening. And so when people are looking at viscera, you need to look at it as a proportion of your lean body mass. So if it's, that's how you actually work out whether it's too high, too low, or just right.
Yeah, makes sense. I like that their research as well. It's good reading material if you guys are into that sort of thing.
Exactly.
I've got a question from Jamie. So he's a friend of the channel. How do I gain weight on carnivore? I'm 82 kilos, 200 to 250 grams of protein, 250 to 300 grams of fat per day, and 0 carb. So he eats quite a very basic carnivore diet. Beef, I believe he has egg yolks, things like that. Very simple stuff.
The question is, when he's talking about weight, what does he mean? Fat? Fat. If you really want to build, let's say you want to increase your fat stores are very low, and you're starting to get people go, I really get these hunger because my body fat's too low, and I need to push it up a bit. Well, the quickest way to do that is, to consume more liquid fats like cream. That's going to basically increase the amount of adipose. So if that's your focus, if you're basically trying to build muscle, that's a different story altogether. Muscle skeletal. There you're basically looking at, providing your body enough protein. So if you're doing, let's say, quite a lot of physical activity, trying to build muscle, you need to provide it with more protein. So if you're doing, light exercise, or moderate movements, then about 1.76 to close to 2 is probably all one needs per kilo body weight. If, on the other hand, and that's, remember, that's 2.2 pounds of body weight, that amount that I just mentioned. If you're trying to go a bit higher than that, then you're looking at, doing the occasional, a bit of exercise like I do, once a week, stuff like that. I do about 2.2 grams. That's it. 2.2 grams is more than enough. If I'm, on the other hand, in the past, I've done up to 4. So if I'm doing like quite a bit of activity, I'll go to about 3.5. If I'm doing shitloads of activity, that means I'm physically moving my body for many hours and doing a lot of activity, up to 4. And I'm talking about even people like the sand people, the Bushmen of the Kalahari. They do about, on average, some of them do up to 4 grams. And these people are actually walking vast distance throughout arable, really rough terrain and even semi-desert type environments. And they're also carrying a lot of load and also carrying a lot of food, animals back, holding them and moving them for hours to get back to, that's a lot of physical activity. And these people need up to 4 grams per kilo of body weight to basically maintain their muscle skeletal structure. So, it really depends on how much are you working that body. That's really what it means. And what sort of composition, what are you trying to achieve? So weight can be anything. as Bart Kay would say, if you want to do weight loss, you just cut off your arm. That'll actually
Yeah.
reduce your weight, or just lose some water weight. So we need to mean what we mean by weight. Are we talking about, muscle skeletal weight or fat weight, which is the two things that preoccupy most people's minds.
Yeah, as a point of context, Jamie, he's a lean body weight. So he's not shredded by any means, but he's not fat either. So he's just a healthy body weight.
Okay.
He, I believe, does a resistance training workout once per week.
Okay.
Has quite a sedentary lifestyle. He drives around a lot most days.
Okay. Yep.
So the Kalahari example might be too much,
No.
perhaps.
Yeah.
But would you
exactly.
push him further in fat or protein specifically, or combination of both?
Look, I would. Yeah, probably both, but just by a small amount, not excessive amount. You've got to play around, because I don't know. People say I live this sort of lifestyle and all that. Well, I've not monitored you. This isn't a controlled situation, so I've got no idea what you're really doing. It's only what you're telling me you're doing, and also your perception on what you understand you're doing, which is the other thing. So I say to people, play around a bit with the protein and fat part and see where it actually lands you in that regard. So if you're trying to put more, some more fat because your fat percentage is too low and you're actually feeling ravenously hungry all the time, well, you need to up your fat then, because you're not getting enough energy. You've built up too much muscle, and that muscle needs energy, and you're not providing it. It's simple as that. So eating more lean meats ain't going to cut it. You may need more fat, and sometimes people don't realize they can need quite a bit more fat.
Yeah.
And
Makes
so
sense
the
to me.
quickest way to get that extra fat in, liquid fats.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In terms of body fat straight away, pretty much. So
exactly.
yeah, makes sense. We've got a quick question here about uni. He's at university late
Yep.
at night, and he wants to exercise close to bed. How bad is it? It might be that he can only do that time of day, but what do you think?
Yeah, look, it's a circadian mismatch. It will affect people's sleep. It's really really bad. You got to find some way of actually getting it in daylight. If you're doing exercise, do it in daylight. Most of our ancestors basically physically moved a lot and did a lot of physical activity in daylight. In the evenings, they'd sit around the campfire talking about the hunt. We are not where our digestive tract starts down regulating. Starts getting us ready for sleep. And the last thing we want to do is increase cortisol at night by doing excessive exercise and suppressing melatonin, especially in the gym where there's a lot of blue light. Not a good idea, Johnny, and you will pay for it in your general health. It'd be better not to do any exercise and do it occasionally when you can on the weekends. You do less damage to your body over the long haul.
Yeah, I agree. I could not have said that about myself. I probably wouldn't. You do what you can do, but ultimately it's not ideal. I mean, I train after one meal.
Try and get a pair of these as well.
That would definitely help. I did experiment with that, Harry. Actually, I actually wore them in the morning, just to see what happened for a few sessions in the gym. It made me sleepy as hell.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. That blue light in the evening in the gyms is gonna really just suppress your melatonin.
That's why every time you see me and Harry on a video, one of us will be wearing glasses, the other one won't.
Well, you're in the morning there, and I'm in the evening here, so yeah.
That's true. Yeah. You've got some more questions here about bodybuilding and exercise, so I'll stick into these ones. So, what is natural human activity at work? As in, what exercise do we evolve doing? So, I guess there's a strong geographic kind of representation for this. Do you think that makes much difference, or is it we all did the same thing?
There is a bit of truth in both. Let's just start what humans have been doing within savanna environments for thousands of years in Africa. Okay. They walk. over long distances to find their food, which is a four-legged creature. Then they pursue it and it knows that it's being hunted. It's being pursued by humans, and it starts moving. What happens is it starts, because it can't sweat. That's an advantage we've got. That's why we're midday persistent hunters. The cats are not around because they can't do it. They sweat as well. And so they only hunt in the early hours or in the evenings. So we've got the advantage in the middle of the day, or the middle of the light period. As a consequence of that is when we get close to the animal, what do? We sprint for the kill to make sure that it can't get away. Then we'll hack it, we'll cut things and stuff like that down to size, and then so it's easier, more portable, so we can carry it easier. So people will carry certain pieces or multiple pieces, whether on their head or with their arms, depending on the size of the animal, all sorts of things like that. And then they will bring that back and then they'll use their bodies. When you hack things with a knife or stuff like that, that's actually moving a lot of different muscle groups. And so there is, you could say, weight bearing exercises there. There is some calisthenics, there's some sprinting, there's walking, there's a lot of these different type of movements that we give them nice and attractive names nowadays, but it's what I call naturalistic movements, is what I call them. And that's what they do. They don't do anything too isolated. And that's why I usually say I agree with Jonathan, and I'm really glad that Jonathan is pushing this whole body sort of using all muscle groups and training all muscle groups, not just doing a lot of this isolation things that people have addictively sort of followed in the past. Oh, this area of my body isn't good enough. I have to focus on that for ages and ages. That creates imbalances, severe imbalances, and can also cause a lot of issues with ligaments and stuff like that. Not a good idea. So you end up with more injuries that way than achieving the results you want of good body composition with a lot of good proportioned musculoskeletal structure. Anyway, that's my view. I mean, in Europe, maybe under the agricultural period, under cutting trees down and all that, we may have actually increased the amount of, you could say, weight bearing activities. But there's another reason for that as well. We also interbred slightly with Neanderthals. Neanderthals a bit more stockier. I've got about one of the highest amounts in my genetics, and it's the reason why I tend to basically be able to put muscle on much easier. Again, because they they were more stockier. I tend to be stockier. My father's always stocky as well. Most of our relatives, again, that is a Neanderthal sort of feature, and also, they tend to have lower myostatin levels, again, which helps them build muscle much easier. So, but they had to fight animals which are massive animals in their environment. Well, midday persistent hunters in Africa, which were animals which were slightly leaner. It was a different type of environment. They were in a much rougher environment, much more difficult. Once the temperature changed and became warmer, they had a disadvantage because their stockiness, they couldn't keep up with the leaner animals. That's why they died out. And we had an advantage and were able to dominate the Eurasian environment. So that's the sort of difference why we exist and they don't. But because we had some interbreeding, we acquired the white skin from them, they were lighter skinned. And we also acquired a number of other features in that regard, more muscularity. It's another reason why people from the Eurasian area tend to basically have much more bigger muscularity compared to Africans. Again, why the domination of bodybuilding and weightlifting and all that is predominantly, you see it in Caucasus, you see it in Mongolia, you see it in all these sort of regions of the world. It's again because of some of those genetics that we got from both Neanderthals and Denisovans in the sort of northern parts of the Eurasian and also parts of the Middle East, as well as people came out of Africa. So that's another element in why we have certain muscularity, and also how we used it in different environments as well. So it's just sort of to covering everything for completeness.
Yeah, I like that. It's important to give people a lot of detail here. So we've got a fellow Australian in the chat, and he's actually a member of my channel, so I'm going to prioritise his question.
Fair enough.
It's Nathan.
Yes.
So, hey guys, how useful is supplemental leucine for bodybuilding? He's asked us both this question a few times, I think.
Has he? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, look, let me put it this way. Leucine is the key amino acid that stimulates muscle protein synthesis, or protein synthesis in general, because you're also talking about the skeletal part as well. Protein synthesis in general within the body. So if your diet is deficient in leucine, you're going to have issues. Minimal is about 2.6 grams that you really have to have in. And I've actually done a video called Leucine. About leucine and insulin, and I sort of cover that, and it actually shows quite clearly in a fasted state you can still get quite a bit of protein synthesis, and that's with just leucine itself in a fasted state. So you'll be shocked how important leucine is. That's why I prefer leucine rather than BCAAs, branched chain amino acids, is because they cross-inhibit each other. Not that they're not important, but I like to basically take my leucine supplement a bit separate, and that's deliberate, in order to not, because if you're eating it with foods, you're going to get some cross-inhibition. And I like to basically just spike my protein synthesis. And I also combine it with taurine, and deliberately, because I know that taurine actually has a slightly myostatin inhibition, which amplifies the effects of protein synthesis from leucine signaling that happens. And also, taurine also raises slightly the insulin signaling, which basically beautifully synergistically works with leucine in that regard. So yeah, it's a bit of a biohack.
Yeah, I like that. Is that benefit still significant if someone's having multiple feedings per day? So if, for example, someone like yourself is having 1 or 2 meals per day versus 4, do you still need to sort of put it in a 5th mini meal kind of thing?
Well, you could. It depends on how long you want to actually be pushing protein synthesis as well. So you could do it the other way. You could eat heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps of meat, and all that you'll do is it'll take you, rather than 2 hours, it'll take you 4 hours to digest in the stomach.
Yeah.
And then it will, rather than being digested over about 5 hours, it could be up to 8 hours. And peristalsis motility from the gut will actually slow down. And actually, taurine plays a role in regulating motility based on nutrient signaling. So that's another reason why the carnivore diet's superior in terms of the transit time of aminos. So you can slow them down. The advantage there, you can actually get more of that amino pool over longer periods of time for protein synthesis. Something you can't do on a veganerized diet as well. I just thought I'd throw that in, just another jab at the Vagoon Society. So you could actually use leucine together in terms of trying to amplify protein synthesis with taurine before a meal combination. So
Yeah.
it's a bit of just a biohack. Or let's say you're doing a fast, what I call a dirty fast. And usually a dirty fast, it means that, well, look, a lot of people get concerned. Oh, I'm going to fall out of autophagy. I'm going to fall out of ketosis and all that. They go like rampant crazy and all that. And I go, calm down, have a chill pill. This is really what happens. You're not in continuously in autophagy when you're fasting. You're basically, it's a pulsatile effect. What happens is it goes up, it goes down. And the reason for that is because as you clear out those organelles, you can actually increase, we'll go into that slightly soon. I haven't actually said this to anyone, I was going to make a video, but I'll actually mention it here. I like Jonathan, so I'll actually,
No, thank you.
I'll drop a bit of information that most people don't know about. But let me just go back just slightly a bit. So let's say you're doing a dirty fast. First of all, you can throw in there 2.6 grams. Throw in a couple of grams of taurine, like 3 minimal, maybe up to a bit higher than that, up to 4. Combine that, and what you'll actually get is, one, you'll get a bit more protein synthesis in that regard, but also that usually drops off the signaling because the insulin signaling will drop off. But what happens is the interaction between those two in the actual amino pool as things are broken down. You've got protease enzymes that actually as stuff comes out, all the junk, what I called about earlier about how leucine and arginine help to basically affect the pathways where they clear out some of this crap out of the cell. Well, you can enhance it by using lower levels of leucine. I'll explain it in it shortly. But you could also do a dirty fast to get a bit of more protein synthesis at the time of fasting by doing that. Now, let's say you say, okay, Harry, I don't want to get any protein synthesis. I just want to maximize autophagy for a long period of time. Well, the trick here, remember what I was talking about, that castor 1 and 2 enzymes at the V-type ATPase. Well, they require arginine and the other thing, leucine, to basically clear out the junk out of the cell. And then you provide the stuff that means enhances autophagy, the clearing out of the junk. But at the other side, which is another nice thing to do, is, but there you have to critically keep the leucine at about 1.1 grams, no more than that. And the other thing you combine is niacin, between 75 and 385. I think it was 385. So I usually, do about, I've got niacin, which is pharmaceutical grade. So it's not the bullshit stuff. It's exactly what it is, 250 milligrams. I take about half of that 125 when I'm doing with food. If I'm not doing food, I'm doing one of these sort of tricky little fasts where I'm actually trying to enhance autophagy. I will basically use, just because by using leucine at 1.1, what you're doing is you're not actually upregulating mTOR. But what you're doing is you're actually pushing these other pathways that are cellular cleaners. I'm not giving a lot of information because I want to do a video and show the science and what is involved in all
guys.
that. Yeah.
After this video, when this eventually comes out, watch it.
And really, when you combine then citrulline, because remember, if you actually take arginine in, the liver's a bit of a hog, a nasty bit of hog. So the best way to actually get your arginine is L-citrulline. You take L-citrulline in, and what you do is you're combining that. It'll get converted in the kidneys to arginine, but then you'll get far more arginine in the blood vessels, and it will move throughout the whole body. That will actually enhance these little organelles to basically do their job for cleaning out the autophagy part. So by using 1.1 gram of leucine together with L-citrulline, a couple of grams of L-citrulline, like 2 or 3, when you're doing a fast and combining them together at the same time, will enhance autophagy and also do another thing. It will protect against muscle loss. Well, there you go, two advantages.
Both.
Yes. So it's a nice little tricky way of using leucine just to send enough protein signaling, protein sort of to send enough signaling in order to tell those cells, do not give up on the actual regular sort of cellular structure of the muscle, but get rid of the stuff that you don't need in there. So you're disposing of the junk, more of the junk. You're enhancing the part that actually is getting rid of more of the junk.
Yeah.
So it's a really nice way of basically protecting muscle from loss, but at the same time enhancing AMPK, all those pathways which are beneficial for weight loss. It actually enhances also fatty acid oxidation, but at the same time it protects muscle from being catabolized. And on the other side, it actually enhances the cleaning up of cellular debris inside the cells. It's just a perfect combination. It's a nice little trick, about 1.1 grams together with niacin. So it's a nice little trick.
Yeah, that'd be a good video when it comes out.
But also don't forget, you also need the citrulline as well. So it's those three together.
Okay. All right. So we've got time for one more question. I've scoured through the chat hard and fast.
Yep.
This is probably the most relevant one for my channel, so I do apologise in advance if we've not been able to answer all your questions. There are a lot come through. I'd say in an hour and a half, Harry's given you a heap of information already. So it's a great job he's been here today, so I appreciate that. And this one I chose was this one. So isn't it more beneficial to add some carbs pre or post workout if I train something like martial arts, where I need explosive power and faster recovery?
No, not really. That's it. It's bullshit. It's really bullshit. You don't need carbs. Let me put it this way. If you become fat adapted, your body will be able to produce all the sugar that it requires, all the glucose that it requires for those filaments in your muscles to basically work and do the contractions. So you're going to have more than enough in that regard. So and this has actually been done by Steve Finney and Jeff Volker. They've actually done the research where they've actually taken biopsies of people, and these people are, Olympic athletes at, racing bicycles at a very high tempo. And so they are using explosive power to win competition. So yeah, it's nonsense. All muscle contractions use glucose, all of them. The question is, and that's coming from directly at the filaments where it's actually being produced, not ATP. ATP plays a role downstream. It's part of the cogs of the three cogs that Bart talks about, but it's not the main game. It provides the ATP for the other two to work, phosphocreatine and those filaments, to be able to utilize the actual the glucose. But no, you don't need to eat it. You can actually produce enough. You just need to become fat adapted. The problem is most people don't become fat adapted, and the ATP cog doesn't work as well until you basically cut. And in many cases, a lot of people are combining fat and sugar and actually causing Randall cycle or low-grade Randall cycle activation, which also inhibits. Just think of it. The Krebs cycle, TCA cycle, is like a Ferris wheel. You've got two doors, CD36, which is where fats come through that door, and the other door is GLUT4, which requires insulin. GLUT1, if you're actually in a low carbohydrate state, everything goes through the other door, GLUT1, at a basal level, which is when you're in a low carbohydrate state. But when you're eating carbs, like Jen's talking here, you're going to be going through GLUT4, and you need insulin. You're trying to push more people onto the Ferris wheel. what are you going to think you're going to cause? Blockade. That blockade is going to actually slow down the utilization of that energy. What's it going to do to their mitochondria? It's going to impede the proper functioning of the mitochondria. So there, one of the three cogs have been impeded to some extent. So what you've actually done, not achieved an improvement, you've actually done yourself a disservice. So either, you're using one energy or using the other energy. The fat energy is much superior. It's got far more, fat soluble vitamins and many other, and it's cleaner. It's lowering deuterium. So in the long run, it keeps your mitochondria from being damaged by too many neutrons coming from the high deuterium component. You've only got so many enzymatic steps through the Krebs cycle to eliminate 2H and push it back into the cytosol, into that middle part of the cell. If more of that gets through because your food is much heavier, you're going to do more damage to your mitochondria. That will zap your energy long term, and you will pay the consequence of a reduced lifespan and health span. So keep that in mind, guys. And a lot of people go, I need that, and I know why, because they're drinking or doing a lot of cheating, and so they are zapping their recovery and their energy, and they go, oh, I'm getting a bit of a boost because you've pushed yourself out of good fat adaptation because you're deranging your energy production systems. Your enzymes are all over the place in what needs to be utilized. The body can't work out what you're trying to do because you're shoving too many different things. And as a consequence, you're paying the penalty for that. You got to make a choice. Do you want health? Or do you want to be able to cheat and have fun? There's consequences with everything people pick. So most people, when they say, oh, I need carbs, no. What you're really saying is, I need a cushion.
A boost.
That's what
pick me up.
Because pick me up because I've stuffed up things. That's really what you're actually talking about. If you are fat adapted and you're getting enough of the nutrients, your body will work really well. Like a lot of these tribal people. So you have to make a choice which way you want to go. Eating inappropriate stuff is going to have consequences, and then trying to get sort of benefits from carbohydrates. Also, the biggest mistake people do when they undereat protein, and then they push themselves in ketosis too high, and that is another problem in itself, because then you're not regulating a lot of the electrolytes properly, and many other things that go out of whack. You're not getting enough, signaling in terms of insulin as well, to hold on to those electrolytes at the kidney level, and all these things then have an effect. So having a big meal, if you're eating I have about 2 meals a day, one big meal and one smaller sort of snacky type meal, depends, per day. Others do 3. If you're using your body more, you're going to be needing more. It's just the reality. You need more nutrients to maintain a body that's actually going to be doing more work. So like anything, so it depends. And so recovery is really where recovery happens is rest. And if you want to reduce some of the damaging effects of any physical activity or whatever, I would say taurine is your deepest best friend, because it will help you reduce oxidative stress, allow you to recover much quicker. And at the same time, it does another thing. It's protective against a number of injuries of different organ systems and also the brain itself. The biggest thing that helps people recover from brain injuries that can happen in martial arts type activities is taurine. It prevents, if you get some damage in the brain or in the heart or in any organ, what happens is you get a red blood perfusion. That means when you get a bit of hypoxic environment that's actually created by the injury, then you get rapidly red blood perfusion coming into that area, and and produces massive amounts of oxidative stress. The thing that actually prevents the severe oxidative stress and provides you with better recovery from things like strokes or injuries or whatever in organs or whatever is taurine. Plus, it reduces, fibrosis in the organs. Another important thing in general throughout the body. Well, obviously, it takes time to reduce that, and many years. It won't happen like magical. If you really want a bit faster magical, you probably look at a supplement like BPC 157, something like that. If you want a bit faster, but there you have to be a bit careful as well, how it's used. So you should be using it on a short-term basis, like for 2 months, and then stopping it for at least 3 months before reintroducing it. And you should be using it only because it is expensive, but also we don't have enough science behind it. But it definitely, we know it does heal the body. It has a healing effect. So we're getting a slightly high, but it does also, obviously, if somebody's got something like metastatic cancer, definitely not, because it does increase angiogenesis, so more new blood vessels. So at a metastatic state, it allows metastasis or cancer cells to move around the body much faster. So we need to be very careful how we use. Now, there is no science that actually shows that BPC 157 in the body, that produced in the body, is associated with cancer. Zero. That's just, there is some people that are saying that. It's nonsense, absolutely nonsense. But obviously, it has the advantage of creating new blood vessels around an injury to provide nutrients to fibrotic tissue to basically be able to heal itself much faster. But at the same time, if you've got certain things, you've got to be very careful. Now, I do cover, if people have got active cancers, but they've got also a lot of injuries and stuff like that, I do have a whole playlist on cancer and how to deal with it. I'm not going to discuss it here. That'd take ages. There's a lot of information how to kill off cancer cells and senescent cells and everything else.
They're good.
Jonathan
They're
knows
very
a lot
good videos.
Yeah. So those are the approaches to take. But personally, I would say to you guys, you don't need carbs to recover. All they're doing is just increasing oxidative stress in the mitochondria. Remember, all carbs go through complex 1. Complex 1 produces the biggest amount of reactive oxygen species within the mitochondria, let alone the deuterium side that puts you at risk for mitochondrial damage over time. So keep that in mind. You don't need that crap.
Yeah. I like how you explained the science around it. And of course, you've given the science, the anecdotes. I'm going to give 3 very quick anecdotes. So myself, I recorded my workout from start to finish the other day. It took 1 hour. Every set that I performed was at least to concentric muscular failure. So I couldn't move the weight any further, basically. And I was working out for 18 minutes of that 1 hour. So it's quite an intense workout. That's one example of someone that doesn't eat carbohydrates from plants or anything like that. Next example, my friend Jerome Armstrong. He's been carnivore for about 5 years. He eats something like, 250 fat and 180 protein, something like that. And he trains all of his workouts in about 20 minutes. He goes from one exercise to the next, back to back to back to back, all at least to concentric muscular failure. So that's a very intense workout. Then we've got Sean Baker, who I met last weekend. 5 inches taller than me, 4 inches taller than me, around about the same sort of weight. He's an Olympic athlete, and he is strong as hell. I shook his hand. He's very strong. So he's a strong guy, a fit guy. He's not eating carbs. 3 anecdotes, 3 different people, 3 high-performing, somewhat elite people in terms of like the sports world. So there's 3 anecdotes there. You can take it or leave it, but the way Harry represented it was very, very well. Very, very good.
Yeah, look, guys, carbs do not make you strong. Your muscle skeletal structure is built from protein, fats, cholesterol. Those things are in animal foods. That's what we're built from. If you're not getting that sort of stuff, even cows are carnivore. Their 3 first chambers take in grass, they ferment it, and then the little organisms, the protozoa, the bacteria, the fungi, all those grow rapidly in those other 3 chambers. And the last 4th chamber is an acidic chamber that actually absorbs these little organisms. That's where it gets its fat, protein, and all the other sort of stuff from. It's just the bugs that are actually eating the grass, fermenting it, and growing themselves rapidly into large amounts. So even the ruminant animals, all the ruminant animals out there have got multi-chamber stomachs. They're fermenting the stuff. They're either getting saturated fats like the cecums in the apes, like or they're eating some bugs, or they're eating some other things. In nature, the best quality protein is that which comes from insects, animals, and stuff like that. It does not come from grass. You've got intermediaries, which are little organisms that actually feed on that and then become available to those animals. Even that side of things is completely utter bonkers and crap. Most of these animals are on a very high saturated fat diet, and proteins that are coming from these little organisms, even the ruminants. So it's nonsense. It's, in nature, you don't get a lot of sugar. It's very rare. We've just got bigger brains, smarter brains, and we've outsmarted ourselves and made a lot of easily available carbs with agriculture. That's the only thing. And for that, we paid a lot of biological costs. 10% reduction in brain, shorter stature for a lot of people for a long period of time, and many other accumulative health problems over generations. So we don't need that crap, guys.
Well said. Thank you for that, Harry. Makes perfect sense. So people can find you at your channel.
Yep.
I'm amazed if they're not subscribed already, honestly. But it's Harry Sopanos. That's the way to find him. That's the way to contact him. He does a live Q&A video, or two of them, every few weeks,
Fortnightly.
maybe 2 to 3, fortnightly.
Yeah, it's usually fortnightly, unless something happens and I have to do it every 3 weeks because some family thing came up or another, thing that took my time.
Yeah, I highly advise people get on there. Get on there quick as well. The questions pile up, as you've seen in this chat, so get on there quick and send him super chats as well. Support his channel. It helps fund his Zoom and all these different things and softwares that he has to apply. He does this all for free, guys. He doesn't sell anything. He just goes to work and researches and provides free advice on the internet. So he's a great guy.
Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate it.